This meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being recorded.
Good.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm Dennis Stone from the Center for Advocacy and Social Justice at the Jacksonville Urban League. And tonight we have a very special program about disabilities and voter suppression, difficulties that those that are sight impaired have to deal with, as well as others with disabilities that prevent them from getting access to voting and really impacting their ability to participate in democracy. I want to thank our interns, particularly Keziah Anderson, Victoria Williams, Emily Orshinsky, Nicola Steelnock, Tia Smith, Xingyi Zhang, and most of all, Beth Kogan, who's really put this together. We're very excited to have this group this evening and these speakers. And at this point, I will turn it over to, I will turn it over to Beth.
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Beth. I'm an intern at the Jacksonville Urban League Center for Advocacy and Social Justice. And I want to start by just thanking Pro Bono ASL, who's interpreting for us right now. I'm gonna put their Venmo and Cash App information in the chat before and after the meeting if you want to make a donation. It's also on our graphic. So I am a white woman in my 20s with brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a collared shirt. We have two speakers today. The first is Tyler Morris from Center of Independent Living in Jacksonville, and Doug Hall in Florida Council of the Blind. And if you have questions while the speakers are presenting, please type them in the chat. And then during the Q&A, we will come back to them. And we highly encourage questions because both of these people are experts in their fields and have a lot of knowledge to share. So, and then we'll have a Q&A and then we will have closing remarks. So first we have Tyler Morris. Tyler is going to do a presentation if you want to share your screen, Tyler, and I will read the bio. Tyler Morris is the Executive Director of CIL Jacksonville, a nonprofit empowering people with disabilities to live independently. Morris began his service in the field of disability in 1996 at the Caribbean Christian Center for the Deaf. Currently, Morris serves the Florida Independent Living Council as the network of centers representative, the Florida Association of Centers for Independent Living as immediate.
Tyler Morris's screen.
Oh.
The shared content is fit to your screen. To see the
Let's
original
just click over my screen.
size quoted the
One
menu.
second. Currently, Morris serves the Florida Independent Living Council as the network of centers representative, the Florida Association of Centers for Independent Living as immediate past president, and on the board of directors for the nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida. In other community roles, Morris has served as chairperson for the City of Jacksonville's Mayor's Disability Council, president for the American Advertising Federation, board member for Riverside Avondale Preservation, and member of the University of North Florida's Exceptional Student Education Steering Committee. He is the recipient of the 2018 University of North Florida's Young Alumni Achievement Award, Everbanks Community Champion Award, City of Jacksonville Service and Leadership Award, Leadership Lake County's Human Understanding and Inclusion Award, and has been recognized as Jacksonville's 30 Under 30. Tyler completed his undergraduate and graduate work at the University of North Florida. He holds a bachelor's degree in special education, deaf studies, and a master's degree in business administration. Okay, Tyler, Please go ahead.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate that. Wonderful introduction. I will make sure to condense it next time, but thank you anyway for making that introduction. My name's Tyler Morris, as Beth said. I am a white male wearing a black polo. It has our SIL logo on it, and I'm sitting in my home office. So thank you to the Jacksonville Urban League and Beth for putting on today's program. It's a very important topic to us. SIL Jacksonville is part of a national network of centers for independent living that started from grassroots organizations for disability equality and out of the deinstitutionalization movement. So we have been around since 1978. We serve Baker, Clay, Duval, St. Johns, and Nassau counties, and we are an agency run by and for people with disabilities. We are proud of our team. Over 60% have a disability at our agency, and we see disability as an asset. So thank you again for allowing us to talk a little bit about our agency and what we do. We are a state-funded agency, so that means we do help with voter registration and voter updating for individuals with disabilities. And that's one of the services that we provide for our consumers at SIL Jacksonville. But Beth wanted me to talk to you a little bit more about what we have been doing for voter education and registration and some of the efforts on how you can get connected as well. We host a We Vote rally that demonstrates the voting voice of people with disabilities. I think it's really important to note that, you know, if people with disabilities voted like their non-disabled peers, about 23.5 million additional votes would have been cast in the 2018 election. So we know that there is a huge disparity between people with disabilities who are voting and non-disabled peers. So it's very important to make your voice heard. Just a quick education, and I'm not monitoring chat, Beth, but just let me know if there's any questions that come in. But just a basic information on registering to vote. There are a lot of different ways on registering to vote. You have online, and I've included that link there. It's registertovote.gov. By mail, in person with your supervisor of elections office. And there's a full list. I'm not sure if this is outside of Duval County or not, but you can find your local supervisor of elections office by clicking that link. And like I said, there are agencies that receive state funding that provide services to people with disabilities who are able to assist with that registration or update of your application. Really important thing to remember for deadline to register, 29 days before an election. So that means that you need to definitely make sure that you get your information in and updated and current to make sure that you are eligible to vote. Part of the initiatives that we do, we have a membership organization that has a lobbyist in Tallahassee. And we have SIL Day at the Capitol every year, which is another way on how to connect. But some of the things that I wanted to talk about for this is some questions that have come up. As a voter, it's important to be informed on your option or your choices, your selections, and staying involved. And I think maybe the first thing to think about is what are the issues that are important to you? And not everybody votes the same. Everybody, doesn't think the same. There's a difference in opinions, but the important thing is that you make that that opinion heard through your vote. Separate from your issues, it's important to know who represents you. If you think about your personal life, you might have different levels of representation. You might have home association, right? Homeowners association that has a board or a council that represents you. Obviously, you have a mayor, you have city council members, you have state representatives, you have national representatives. All of those individuals were put into their seats through votes from constituents. So it's really important to know who represents you. So there's a lot of cool ways on knowing who that is and getting connected all the way down to the local level. I've included the link here at usa.gov. There's also a phone number that you can call in as well to get information. There's really cool apps too that you can download for Android or iOS devices as well that help you get connected to your representatives. And so that's very important to know and how to get in contact with them. Conversation doesn't stop when they're elected, right? There's a lot of conversation. We hear a lot from candidates beforehand, but the conversation continues after that as well. And it's important to stay connected. Another question that comes in is, well, I'm registered to vote, but where do I vote? Well, it depends on where you live. But there's some really cool ways to check that very easily on your voting precinct. You can go through the Supervisor of Elections office. This link will take you to the majority of them, I believe. You enter in some information and it will show you where your precinct is in your area. One of the important things, and I think that Doug is going to talk a little bit more about this as well, is your general rights on election day. As a person with a disability, your rights don't change on election day. The things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, Rehabilitation Act of 1973, all of those things still exist regardless of if it's election day or not. So precincts are required by federal law to be accessible. So that means that if you are an individual with mobility limitations, physical disability, making sure that you have access to that precinct, making sure that you have the ability to privately and independently vote or elect someone to be with you to assist with that. And that you are able to have those fair and reasonable accommodations that are entitled to you through federal protections. So it's important to remember that accessibility is the law. Asking poll workers for assistance or an accommodation is your right. Whether that may be coming in and letting them know that you are not able to stand for long periods of time, or designating someone to help you with assistance if you so choose. Having those communications with your poll workers as you show up is important, so they understand how they can best assist you. So the question is what happens if you face barriers related to your disability, say on election day? Well, obviously, we believe in self-advocacy and making sure that you're educated and informed on what your rights are, as well as what to expect during your voting experience. But having conversations with poll workers are very important. Trying to solve the issue there. You know, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but even if polling locations close and you are still in line, you wait. You are able to cast your vote. You are in line. So having those conversations with poll workers, the Supervisor of Elections office, Supervisor Hogan and his team work with us on the We Vote rally every year. So they are very familiar with disability related issues. Next, you also have the Supervisor of Elections office. There's a hotline that you can connect to and let them know what any issues are that you are having, and then you can escalate that too. There is a national election protection hotline. You can work with advocacy organizations like SIL, and then also Disability Rights Florida fights for rights for individuals with disabilities too. So all of those services are available to you as well. Lastly, and I'm not sure how I am on time, Beth, but how do you know where things are in their process, right? Are they in committees? Are they ready for the governor to sign off? Are they going, where is it in the process? Who are those members that are part of the committees that help make decisions at the state and national level? Here are some quick links on the screen on where you can track bills. You can set up an account. You can monitor them to get email updates from the Senate or the House. And there's also one for the United States Congress that you can look at as well. Most importantly, how do you get involved? Like I said, the disability voice is important to be heard. and it is it's important to stay connected with our individuals. You can do something as simple as creating a Google alert that will let you know if your issue is in the news anywhere, that it will send you an email to give you an update on what that news was. Get involved at your city level too. The city of Jacksonville has a Mayor's Disability Council that provides support to individuals with disabilities in Duval County. And they are a council that helps make decisions and the guidance of things. And also, advocate where you can, and arm yourself with the tools and resources that you know your rights, and that you're able to help educate others on what is available to them. So that was just a quick overview of some of the things and some of the suggestions on where you can get some more information. There is a statewide initiative that I would really suggest that you visit the website. It's Access the Vote Florida, and that is a group of disability rights advocates that meet, I believe, monthly to help escalate accessibility of voting precincts and also registration to vote for people with disabilities as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. Okay, we're gonna save questions for after, so we're gonna move on to our next speaker. Whoever is the host right now, if you could pin our other interpreter, they're going to switch off every 15 minutes. Or you can make me a co-host again. Okay, so next we have Doug Hall from Florida Council of the Blind. And one second.
Okay. Do you want to do an intro, or you want me to start?
Do you want me to read your intro?
No, I can start.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Tyler. That was a wonderful presentation. You gave a good overview of the process. I'm afraid I'm going to be giving some comments that are positive, but I'm also going to be giving some comments that are not so positive. So here goes. First of all, I think we all need to thank the many advocates over the years that have worked so hard to enable us to get where we are today. I remember when I started voting a long time ago, at first they told me I didn't need to vote because I was blind, but then finally they gave me a Republican and a Democrat to make sure that they voted the way I wanted, except I had to tell other people how I was voting. Finally, we got changes made, so I was able to take the person into the polls with me that I chose to vote for me. Still wasn't right, but it was better. Now, coming up to roughly 2000, a lot of advocates worked with the state, worked with other entities, and we got a machine in the polls that enabled a person who was blind or had a disability to actually vote completely independently. It was a digital machine. They were able to vote digitally. And for the first time, I was actually able to vote independently, which was wonderful. Unfortunately, the legislature decided that that wasn't good enough. They didn't trust digital voting, so they mandated you have to vote on paper, which, except that they said that the illegal machines, digital machines, were okay for those of us who were print impaired. So we could use that until something better came along. Well, something better did come along. In a few years ago, some companies came out with a machine that allows people to vote on paper, but also do it independently. There in Jacksonville, you have the Automark, which is a marking system that enables a person to listen to what's being said and then select what they want. And then they click a key and the machine prints a ballot with the choices that the person wants. Then they just take that ballot and they put it into the tabulator like everybody else, and you got to vote independently, which is wonderful. Here in Volusia, where I live, we use the express vote, which does the same thing. So in every county now in Florida, we have accessible voting equipment at every precinct. And what's nice about it is that everybody can use those machines, not just those of us with print impairments. The legislature decided 2 years ago that all voters could use those machines, and we encourage people to use those machines. You can vote by using a keypad and listening with headphones to what the choices are and make your choices, or you can actually use a touch screen. You can actually use a touch screen to cast your votes. So whether you're blind or whatever it is, you can use those machines. So it's wonderful. And like I said, every precinct has those machines. I encourage all of us to go and use those machines. They cost a lot of money, and it's terrible if 1 or 2 people use them in a precinct. So we all need to use them. I really encourage everyone to get involved and go out there and speak your mind and tell the officials what we want. Now the problem, and that's good, but the problem came with vote by mail or absentee ballots because they were not accessible. A blind person had to tell a sighted person to fill out a piece of paper that would be sent in to allow them to vote in absentee wise. Well, we changed that. Beth mentioned I was with Florida Council of the Blind. Last year, the Florida Council, well, take that back. For several years, the Florida Council of the Blind and other disability groups have been working with the state to promote accessible mail-in voting, and nothing was happening. Finally, last June, the Florida Council of the Blind filed suit against the Secretary of State, the governor, and all the supervisors' elections in the state, requesting immediate certification of a vote by mail system, which is available. The state did certify finally the Omni system by Democracy Live, which enables a person to be able to vote independently and secretly using a computer. However, the state decided that it was up to each county. So we had to negotiate with each of the 67 counties to promote the idea of accessible voting. We did negotiate with them, and they did decide it's a good idea. So by March 31st of 2022, every county in the state is to have accessible mail-in voting or vote by mail systems. However, we need to call the supervisor's office and tell them we want it, because what they're saying is, well, nobody is calling, so why should I do it if nobody wants it? So we need to let them know we want it. My philosophy is that it doesn't matter whether I use it or not. It needs to be, the ADA says that anything that is available for the non-disabled must be all equally available to those of us with disabilities. So we need to make sure that is done. That gives you well, let me back up. The settlement that we made with the supervisors is that they set up 5 pilot counties to try use of vote by mail in the November election. Unfortunately, not very many people used it. We need to work to get that done. Like I said, by 2022, every county is to have it. If you want to vote by mail, then you need to call the county and tell them you want that. Now, that's the positive. Negative is that in this past March, I guess of 2020. No, this past March, the legislature decided to pass this legislation. Is called SB 90, the election, they call it Reform Act. We're very concerned about that. One of the supervisors, trying to find his name, one of the supervisors basically said that this legislation is tantamount to suppression because it sets a number of restrictions and limitations. They're afraid that people may not do what they want, so they've set a lot of restrictions to make it more difficult. One of the things that really concerns me is that, number one, they're saying that, frankly, only immediate families are allowed to handle the ballot. So you can't have a neighbor go and pick up several ballots and drop them off. That's not legal according to this. They also want to limit the number of drop boxes that people could drop the completed ballots off and be counted. They also want to mandate that a paid person has to oversee that drop box, if there is one, every minute. And if there isn't somebody there, then there can't be a drop box. So it's going to limit access to us. One of the things it does, and I'm concerned, is it's going to basically say that if you do certain things, then you would be guilty of a misdemeanor, a first-degree misdemeanor, a very expensive misdemeanor. And I'm fearful that some of the supervisors and their staff are not going to be willing to do things because they'd be afraid they're going to get sued or have a hefty fine. They want to limit the basically being able to distribute, order, request, collect, deliver, or even possess vote by mail ballots, unless you are the person or a member of the immediate family. That's going to make people who are officials unwilling to do things that we may want them to do. Another thing they want to do, according to this, is they want to delay the counting of absentee ballots. Instead of counting them when they have been in the past. A writer from the Miami Herald named Carl Hyacin said that the plan that some people want to do would minimize the effects of Black voters. In actuality, this system, we're fearful this system is actually going to limit the effectiveness of young voters, of women, of Black voters, and especially people with disabilities, because it sets up a number of roadblocks that could negatively impact our ability to vote. The other thing I want to mention is that it's very important, and Tyler kind of said this before, it is very important that we all call our supervisor elections office and our representatives to let them know what we want. I've been working on election issues for many years. And one of the things I keep hearing is that although people with disabilities comprise a large number of citizens in the country and in the state, very few of us vote. And unless we vote, unless we get out there and are seen and cast and let people know what we want, we're not going to get what we want. So I really encourage all of us to call that supervisor's office, call your representatives, set up a relationship with them so that you're respected as an advocate, and have them listen to you. But again, get out there and actually be involved. And I did less than 15 minutes.
You did. You have a few more minutes if you want to.
Okay. I will mention other than that, and it's related. It's very important that we be involved. Tyler, you mentioned a number of things that you were involved in. That's wonderful. It's not only it's important for us to get out there and vote, it's also important for us to be involved in our political civilization, what's happening, be involved as advisors, being involved as advocates. There's more to voting than going to the polls or casting a vote by mail ballot. Another aspect of voting or influencing is by being involved in as advisors, being involved by talking to people, by talking to officials, talking to other people, to get them to do what we want and to work within a system to assist other people to make changes. That's a form of voting we all need to do. Okay. Now, are there any questions?
Yes, thank you so much. We will go into questions now. I'll go with the question that was just asked a moment ago, which was, do you know if poll workers are trained to help voters with disabilities?
Good point. Very good. Good question. The answer is yes and no. They should be. Unfortunately, it depends on what they are taught. It could, in many ways, they are. They're usually given a video, and sometimes there are live presentations by people. I think it would be good if somebody with a disability were to be involved as part of the presentation to teach poll workers about how to deal with it. But it's really up to us as voters. I have found that I spend a lot of time educating the poll workers because they just don't know. And what may be good for Tyler may not be good for me. So I think it's important that we actually work with that person, that poll worker, to let them know what we want and maybe to educate them about what our needs are, because like I said, everybody's needs differ.
Tyler, did you want to add anything to that?
Doug hit the nail on the head. It's all, there's not a universal, I guess. Different supervisor elections have different ways of preparing poll workers. I know in Duval County, they do have disability sensitivity training as part of their onboarding. But Doug, you bring up a really good point of nothing about us without us. So when making those decisions and forming an environment, making sure that it's accessible and inclusive is very important. Whether it be a movie theater or a precinct, it's built environments. We know that disability is often not the limitation. It's the environment that's built around it. So things like accessible precincts and curb cuts into sidewalks, all of those things that came out of what Doug was mentioning, that grassroots effort, that fight for equality. On the 26th, we'll celebrate the 31st anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we're still fighting for the things that are guaranteed under that human rights law. I mean, it's amazing that we're still having this conversation, but to Doug's point, it's exposure, it's the comfort level, and also understanding. From our experience, we've seen that people that haven't been involved in the process, it's sometimes intimidating for them at the first go round. But you have to understand that those individuals have homes they go to, they eat and drink just like we do. They are human beings, and connecting to them is possible. And it shouldn't be intimidating for anyone. Anyone is entitled to schedule a meeting or walk into an office, have their opinions be heard. It might not be agreed upon, but it's important to get that out. And at the simplest level, I think all of us can ask, especially around that time where it's time to make sure that your registration is updated or entered, having those conversations. It should be just a conversation of like, how you doing? Are you registered to vote? Are you ready to vote? Having that at the simplest point of asking others around you and being able to have that conversation afterwards of, oh, well, my vote's not going to matter. Well, it does. There are races that have been determined by one vote. There have been tie votes, and it's really important that all of us, regardless of how we vote, do.
Good, very good points. I used to do a presentation to the poll workers during their training. And one of the things that we learned in doing it is that the whole thing about teaching poll workers what to do and what comes down to one little thing. It's best for the poll workers to ask the person, how can I best be of assistance? Let the person tell them what they want. So it's very important. I used to serve on an advisory committee that advised our supervisor election here. And that basically the same thing. We basically taught our poll workers, just ask, how can I help you? What your needs are.
We have another question. What should organizations do to educate poll watchers, like with the ACLU, on the rights of voters with disabilities?
You want to handle it first, Tyler, and have me back up?
Sure. The disability sensitivity is important. ACLU has tremendous efforts in making sure there's equality and accessibility for persons with disabilities. So I guess the question of what should organizations do to educate poll watchers, I kind of expand that and just say, educate everyone. I know it's a very broad brush, but specifically targeting because of how someone is involved in their exposure to disability. We need to be having conversations about disability in every walk and aspect. And I think that that's important to advocate in all places, not just precincts, but knowing. I think ACLU is very familiar with rights. I would be more concerned on those individuals that are giving their time and making sure that they're aware of disability sensitivity etiquette and best practices.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good point. In terms of organizations, my response to that really is that the organization would be most helpful by getting involved with the policymakers as advisors, to have that policymaker respect the representatives from that organization and take that what that organization wants and consider it. For instance, here last year when we were looking at being one of the pilot programs for the Omni system in voting, the Halifax Council of the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind locally here worked with our supervisor to set up a mock election to help people learn how to use the accessible vote by mail system. We educated her. She actually came and talked to our groups and listened to what we wanted, what our thoughts were. So we developed a relationship where she respected our opinions. And I think that's what an organization can and should do to be able to influence what's happening.
Doug, you bring up a good point. I'm glad that you've done that. I think the exposure and familiarity is important to our voters. With the We Vote rally, Supervisor Hogan and his team were able to demonstrate one of those AutoMark machines for us. And they did a visual of it and kind of demonstrated it too, and the audio response and everything too. So that's a good point of being familiar with and being involved in those decisions before they happen to make sure that people with disabilities are included.
Good. By the way, I just want to add one little thing to what you were saying there. In terms of the Omni system, which is going to be a statewide system, we are actually recommending that we're recommending a Zoom presentation by Democracy Live to educate people of how to use the system. And that's good, but it's not as good as having hands-on use of the item so you understand it.
So, what are some of the unique challenges that disabled people of color, and especially Black people with disabilities, face when attempting to vote? How do we best address both racial disparities and disparities people with disabilities face?
That's a difficult question. Each group, whether they be Black or female or young or have a disability, have specific things that they have to be aware of, but many times they're similar. I think one of the problems we have is an attitude that people have. We need to get beyond that attitude that some people have, whether it be an attitude of officials or poll workers or whatever, or the attitudes of the individual voter when they go in, that if they expect a problem, they're going to find a problem. So I think part of it is that we as individuals need to be aware and to be flexible, but not allow something to stop us from doing what we need to do.
You know, Beth, that's a good question. And Doug, what I'd add is intersectionality is important to look at, and what happens if someone is a person with disability and also a person of color. We know that disparities exist in health, education, employment, based on, socioeconomic status, race or ethnicity, disability status. And I think that there's a lot of efforts that are going on that organizations can collaborate with. For example, the SIL network in Florida has been having monthly equity, diversity, and intersectionality calls to look at internal processes of our organizations and what we can do to look at disparities of those intersections. So looking at that is really critical. You have to know where you are to know where you need to go. And so, those efforts are really important. Knowing where those groups exist, where are there higher concentrations of different minority groups, and probably in addition to that is the rural communities and how they are getting information, technology and mail and information, and reaching out to those. So, I would say to organizations, know where these minority groups exist, know what the disparities are that come from some of those intersections in rural communities, and be involved in this equity, diversity, and intersectionality movement that's happening in private and public sectors, to provide feedback and provide your thoughts.
Thank you. So after I asked the question and kind of was talking with some people, I realized that that kind of question is more appropriate to be asked to a person of color. So I apologize for that, but I really, really appreciate your responses. But we should definitely look to the people who are experiencing the impact of the situation to hear their experiences with it.
And that's a good point, but at the same time, we have opinions that, and we're willing to express our thoughts on it. But yeah, I would like to hear the opinion of other people that actually experience the difficulty.
Yeah, no, that was on me for asking the question. Like I asked you, so I appreciate your answer. So we have another question. Now that the law makes it more difficult to assist voters with disabilities, how can we assist them without breaking the law?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know, because right now there are several lawsuits that are testing that case, because that is going to be that's one of the issues that this new law is bringing up. How do we assist someone? And I'm afraid that this law is set to do exactly that, to make it difficult, because they're saying they want a family member to assist that person. What if you don't have a family member? I think I'm not sure how to answer that question, because that's one of the issues that we have with this new law, that it's going to limit the ability to have someone assist you. I'm really afraid that this particular part of the legislation may end up resulting in less people being able to vote. My wife was mentioning to me, and I don't know the answer, what about people with disabilities that live in nursing homes that can't get out? If the law says that that an individual is not able to handle the ballots, absentee ballots, how in the world does someone in a nursing home be able to cast a vote and be able to have somebody take care of it? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that's one of the things we need to look at. Tyler, what's your thought?
The resources that I shared, and to answer Doug, it's a difficult question, but to address fear and uncertainty, I found that education is really good at fighting both of those things, and not waiting to the last minute to look at that. Thinking about rights, and understanding those to do that well in advance and not wait till that last day to register to vote, I think is important. So advocacy throughout the year and not just during election time is important to get that information out so people can educate themselves.
Good point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Tyler, something that was asked while you were speaking was, well, you may have covered, but will SB 90 affect CIL voter registration efforts in the 2022 election?
Yeah, so like Doug mentioned, there's a couple of suits. I know NAACP, I believe, has one out right now to challenge that. And I think that even the Supervisor of Elections office is waiting on guidance on how to move forward with some of those changes. I know that they are able to register individuals for mail-in vote up until December 31st, 2022 right now in the system. And after that, it's uncertain on this Senate bill.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So unless anyone has any other questions, there's just one more question. One second. What can advocacy groups like the Jacksonville Urban League do to help promote those with disabilities to vote/register to vote from a grassroots perspective?
I wish I had an answer for that one. If I could answer that question, I'd be a millionaire. The Urban League and other advocacy groups need to develop communications with individuals, get people involved. I think one of the things that groups can do, the advocacy groups can do, is to educate people, encourage people to be involved, to reach out and develop an attitude where people want to participate, that want to be involved. I would like to see groups like the Urban League to possibly have things like this outside of Jacksonville. I think other people need to hear these kinds of things. Organizations like the Florida Council of the Blind and National Federation and other groups, I think we have a responsibility to educate our members and other people around us and try to encourage people to be involved. I think the best way to get someone to not be involved is for them not do anything. Or someone told me once, if you want something done, ask somebody who's busy, because they're willing to do things. And I think what the league needs to do and other groups need to do is to develop an atmosphere where people are interested in doing something and asking questions.
I would agree with what Doug's saying. I've seen through conversations over the past year, the conversation of diversity. There's a lot of things that are listed, and often the thing that's left out is disability. But diversity includes disability.
Boy, you are so right.
Sexual orientation, nationality, religion, race, ethnicity, all of these things are, but I find that disability is often left out when someone's defining diversity. It's a diversity, or disability affects all of us. It has no barriers. So I think that organizations need to adopt practices that not just bring people on, but elevate them to decision-making positions. Because like I said, nothing about us without us. I think true independence is being able to make those decisions for yourself and not having others make them for you. So it gives me great hope when I see national organizations elevating people with disabilities to decision-making positions. Lived experience is extremely important. So I would give the recommendation to, the Urban League and other organizations. What are your hiring practices? How have you built your environment to include true diversity, to include all different minority groups? Because you got to practice what you preach, and making sure that you have, accommodation request policies, and celebrate that diversity as much as you possibly can. I think that is a environment that we can set for ourselves in our homes, we can encourage in our workplace, and also with our government.
That good points there, Tyler. One of the things I want to mention, talking about being involved, the Democratic Party has what's called the Democratic Disability Caucus, which are groups of people. The organization promotes people with disabilities and the needs of people with disabilities. I wish the Republican Party had a similar thing. I have not heard of the Republican Party having such a thing. I'd like to know if they do, and if they do, and maybe people need to get involved in it. Unless we get the officials to listen to us, we're going to get nowhere. I wanted to mention, you're talking about an organization doing things. We talk about disability, and you're right, Tyler, disability is forgotten quite often. But it's funny, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have websites that are not accessible. And they send out information in graphic form, which is not accessible to screen readers. I have to question, why do they do that? They do that because they don't know what we want. And I'm not sure they think what we want is important because we're not involved. I was reading statistically, almost 14% of Floridians who vote have disabilities, but 28% of Floridians either have disabilities or have someone in their home with disabilities. That means we have a lot of political clout if we would use it. And I really encourage people to use that clout and get involved.
Thank you. I just have actually one last quick question. Is if we were to do a similar event like this in the future, what do you think would be a good direction to go into, or a good conversation to open up?
That's a good question.
You can think about it. You can email me.
I would like to see us reach out to large organizations, and getting the large organizations involved in promoting what we want. For instance, Tyler, you mentioned the CIL network. The CILs in this state influence a lot of people. I used to serve on FILC for several years. I've been involved with our local CIL for several years, but I think the CIL network would influence a lot of people. That might be a way to get the word out. The consumer groups, the Florida Council of the Blind, National Federation of the Blind, other consumer groups, I think could advertise, could promote this kind of a thing, and maybe get some people involved in participating. I'd like to see this kind of an activity done again.
We recently wrapped up 5 town halls across Northeast Florida. The Mayo Clinic funded what were our disability impact sessions, and it was focusing on that intersectionality that we were talking about a little bit earlier on the presentation, and understanding some of those things that are happening across counties. We've heard anything from transportation to someone who has a disability and transgender, stopping their search for work because they were discriminated against. So we heard a lot of varying things. And, to your point earlier, Beth, I can only speak for myself and the minority groups that I represent. But SIL is very aware to elevate from a grassroots level the voices of those marginalized groups that need to be heard. I think that that's important. So it's great that you have Doug and I on, and we appreciate the invite. But I think hearing from those voters and some of the disparities and barriers that they have would be a really great thing to collect, and something that SIL would be able to, and I'm sure Council for the Blind as well, to address those barriers.
Great, thank you so much. That was so helpful. Oh, good. Tia just put in the chat again if you want to donate to Pro Bono ASL. Thank you so much for interpreting for us. I think that Dennis is going to end with the closing remarks, but thank you to our speakers so much. We appreciate you. We learned a lot, and I definitely hope that this is a conversation of many. So
Thank you very much. Now I get to go to another meeting.
Great work. Thank you for the invite.
Well, before you do that, Doug, we want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and Tyler as well, to serve the disability community and to inform everyone of important issues for the disability community. We're very concerned at the Urban League that the lack of vote is a lack of power, and you can't eliminate equity gaps without power. So we're very pleased that you've joined us, and it's very clear that we ought to be able to connect with more members of the disability community and offer them a chance to share the challenges they have, and to join us in the efforts that many are making to improve access to vote. One of the things that's important to note, and I would like to send you both a link to the recording of this session tonight, so that you could share it with others in the community, because I think it's going to be very valuable to them. And at the same time, along with that link, we will send you a survey for people to provide us with feedback relative to things that they would like to hear, things that they would like us to work on at their Center for Advocacy and Social Justice.
Good.
Again, we really appreciate your being with us tonight. And I also, again, want to thank the interns, particularly Beth Cogan, who orchestrated all this and put it together, and the rest of the interns who are such a vital part of the Center for Advocacy and Social Justice at the Urban League. Again, on behalf of Richard Danford, the president, and the board of the Urban League, I want to thank you. And we look forward to partnering with you on other activities. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us. I think it's wonderful. I think it's a great idea, and I'd like to see it being done elsewhere.
Thank you. We wish everyone a good night, and encourage you to join other presentations that we have. We'll be sending out a newsletter for attendees so that they can get a list of those.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Emily Orshinsky has left the meeting.